I'm going to tell you all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support. Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. I hope your weekend was well. I hope it was really great. Did you watch the Oscars? Hope so. Whoa! Holy cow. John Russell. Thank you so damn much, sir. Holy cow. That's a great way to start the show. Thank you so much for the donation, John Russell. Damn. Love you, man. Thank you. Whew. That's awesome. All right, well, let's get started with today's show, shall we? We've got a good one today, I think. Before we get started, of course, I want to say thank you to Dots Tapes. The tunes you hear right now that are probably a little too loud, we'll bring them down a bit. Dots Tapes, their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Go check them out. Also want to remind you guys that this show is going to be available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Leave us a rating review. It goes a very long way to make sure that the podcast continues to grow, which is really great. I want to say thank you to the Patreon members, the members of the YouTube channel, and everyone who sends super chats. Thank you, John Russell. Thank you guys for the donations. They're not necessary, but we do use them to make the show go round. So we truly appreciate it. If you can't donate, don't sweat it. All of our content is free. There's no paywall here. And we've also got a free Discord, which we had a wonderful conversation on Friday night after the show. I highly recommend you check out the link for the Discord in the description. We've got links for our co-hosts, UFO Jane Kyle, and Mr. Rather Be Squidding. So let's go ahead and bring them up, guys. How you doing? How was the weekend?
Yeah.
Never long enough, but...
Never long enough.
Good. My kiddo had grandma time this weekend, so we got to go about town as actual people. But I had a little FOMO though over that event that you did, Luis, and a bunch of people did.
Oh,
Amy and the observation deck.
No, it was fun. They told me I was a featured guest. I guess it didn't really sort of register in my brain. But yeah, it was the first time I attended one of those virtual, the thing put on by Captain Ron, the observation deck. And so I wandered around the observation deck, had some really fun conversations. We drove the boats, we saw the fireworks. We went and saw a DJ who was playing, which was really cool. Yeah. There was
fireworks and live music.
There was breathing rooms. There was conference rooms. I had like a little booth where people could go visit. We had a discussion with, I believe his name was Anthony from Area S4. I believe is the channel. So it was the first time I met him. We had a great conversation before the show. It was great. It was a conference. I got to talk on stage. People got to ask me questions. It was fun. It was really, really fun. Yeah. It was the first time I'd done it. So I wasn't very familiar with the person who ran the event. She was just like, hey, we'd love to have you. I was just like, okay, sure. I would, just as long as the event was free, which it was. Mm-hmm. So that was cool. Nobody had to pay anything to go check it out, but I'm sure there's going to be more. I have a feeling.
Yeah. I think I was one of the later people to be invited, and we had our weekend scheduled already.
She asked me a week like last weekend.
I could see these happening more often, right? Like, what if you had an element of this to just normal events where you already do on YouTube, but people could. I don't know how that works. That'd be cool for this UCR stream, right? If people wanted to, they could come into a virtual theater and with like
UFO
usernames
metaverse.
and like have little chat boxes.
Yeah.
Like that would be hilarious. I love that.
Well, I'm gonna say this last thing, and then we'll bring up Jazz. But we had a dinner with Taras Matla, from the curator from the University of Maryland. He took us out to dinner. It was so sweet.
Wow, nice.
And he had brought up the idea of the multiverse, and being able to corroborate or film a real UFO in the multiverse, and then be able to go from any direction and see what happened to. I was like, dude, my God, that is just like, that could be that. I could just see how terrible that could be. Yeah. How terrible that could be for the community. My girlfriend says,
I bet they'll use it for other things besides UFO hunting too, would be my guess. So.
Yeah, hold on one second. Sorry,
if
guys.
they've got that kind of technology, right?
Let's see. Is that better, my Michelle? I guess I had a smudge on my camera, so she told me. Anyway, all right. Let's get into the show, shall we, guys? Without further ado, good friend of the show, the Dolphin Emperor, writer, journalist, investigator, Mr. Jazz Shaw of the Debrief Media and Salem News. Sir, how are you? Oh, your mic's muted.
Oh, wait, sorry. Doing good. Thanks for inviting me. That's what I was trying to say. No, I've been running back and forth all afternoon, and I didn't want to distract everybody with having my mic on, so sorry.
Hey, no worries, man. Thank you so much for being here. It's always great to have Jazz Shaw on speed dial, because he's always writing stuff, and anytime we have breaking news, it's always great to get him in here because he breaks it down as good as anybody else. So Jazz, I guess let's start with your article. You wrote another article. I'll bring it up here so everyone can check it out with us. I found it a lot of fun. Titled "Long Before the Phoenix Lights, There Was Incident 40," and it includes photos of an alleged UFO and perhaps the first appearance of Men in Black. The thing I found fascinating is a lot of this stuff took place in Phoenix, Arizona, right? And where everybody thinks the first thing is the Phoenix Lights. But according to your research, there's been a lot of activity in that area. So I guess we can start there.
That whole area has always been active. But this was one of those items that popped up in Project Grudge and later in Project Blue Book. It was a weird event, but it was better documented than so many, but it didn't get much attention because the ironic thing is this event, the guy that saw what he couldn't explain, it was a UFO. It was sort of disc-shaped, but it wasn't really a disc. It was flat. It was black. And it unfortunately happened like within 48 hours of when the Roswell news broke. And it was like 2.5 weeks after the Kenneth Arnold sighting. It was when everything was exploding. So this guy had this sighting that looked really interesting, really, really interesting. And he just sort of got blown off the front page pretty quickly, So, it was a good sighting. And there was the follow-up investigation by the government was possibly more interesting even than the UFO, because this guy, he took two pictures of a craft that he claims he saw coming and spiraling down towards the ground and then turning up at a 45-degree angle. And thanks for getting that picture up. What he took pictures of was so much closer to what Kenneth Arnold drew in his drawings and described than a flying saucer, because Kenneth Arnold never said it was a flying saucer. He said it was a flat thing that skipped like a saucer across the water. It was the newspapers that called it a flying saucer. And those photos, they look remarkably like Kenneth Arnold's drawings, but the whole thing got washed away because there was like this wave of sightings that happened, all in the same period of time in 1947. And the investigation, let's just say it took some dark turns on the side of the government.
In what ways?
Well, when you look at the Project Grudge reports, the first stuff that they talked about, and that's all listed in the article, it was like, oh, well, this is nonsense. This can't possibly be real. And they were coming up with every excuse in the book why this shouldn't be a real thing. But on deeper analysis, they were like, wow, this is a lot like Incident 17. Incident 17 was the Kenneth Arnold sighting. So that they had a lot of common. But when the investigation started, yes, they had serious people going looking at the photos. When they got the negatives for the photos, which we'll get to in a moment, I'm sure, they went and examined it, and they were like, yeah, that looks pretty solid. They tried to come up with some other explanations. But the biggest part of the investigation the government launched was not into the UFOs. It wasn't into the photos. It wasn't into the negatives. They spent a long time investigating this guy who took the pictures. And they wanted to know, well, is he a good American? Is he a good citizen? Might he be a communist sympathizer or something like that? You know, is he a reliable person? They really, and there's a ton of documents in the archive I linked. Yeah, there's stuff where they looked into the pictures and could this be real? And we later found that there was actually a second pair of witnesses who saw the same thing who never showed up in the initial reports. But they spent their time trying to find out things like we got one document that we published. 5 times they ran this guy's credit rating, just to see if he had paid his bills. They found out that his mother was an immigrant from Russia. And then they immediately started saying, oh, she's a Russian immigrant. And you got to remember the era, and they're like, oh, well, that draws into question his patriotism. How dedicated is his family to the United States? His mother's a Russian immigrant, and it goes on and on. And they bring up all these, oh, he was divorced. That's terrible. He doesn't go to church regularly. Although one of his neighbors said we say him at church every week, they still publish a thing saying he's not a churchgoer, he's not a religious person, he's been divorced. He wasn't, he didn't manage to make his marriage work. There's just all this stuff that shows up. They probably spent 70% of their time investigating him, as opposed to the 30% that they spent investigating what it was that he saw and he photographed. And this guy was well known in his community as being kind of an electronics genius. He had built his own telescope we're talking the 1940s. He built a bunch of radios. He was a big radio enthusiast, and most people couldn't find a place to buy two-way radios. He was building them. He built his own television before almost anybody else had a television and there was no signals to receive. And he was a huge electronics enthusiast, and he was a really smart guy. And but he took these pictures, and he went and contacted both the government and the media. He contacted the media first. The newspaper, we have all the clippings there of the report that was put out in the Phoenix. It was the Republic, I think. But despite all that, there was a lot of attention just paid to, well, this has got to be fake, right? And they kept finding ways to find excuses to say that, well, this guy's questionable, he's dodgy, we don't know what to do about this. And it was kind of a shame because, well, we'll get into the Men in Black thing in a minute, but they took away the only evidence he had. He never got it back. And there's a huge paper trail that the government had the evidence until whatever time it got lost or destroyed or whatever. But, he didn't get it back. But he had documented something pretty remarkable, and the government really treated him like a suspect instead of a witness the whole time. And that was, I think, one of the most disturbing things, aside from the Men in Black thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked that so this was, you said that the Kenneth Arnold thing was incident number 17 in the Project Grudge, and
Right.
This incident happened 2 weeks later, I believe, and that was incident 40. So does that mean that there's 23 UFO reports within those 2 weeks?
No, I covered that in the article. The numbers, the incident numbers that were assigned were the number, you got to remember that a lot of these incidents, the data was recorded and stuff before Project Grudge actually started collecting everything. They didn't assign them dates based on or numbers based on dates. It wasn't chronological. It was just whichever one they picked up and recorded and started building a file first. Like incident 1 took place in the early 1960s. It was in the Hudson Valley in New York. That
Interesting.
was when they started collecting things. It's like, okay, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Look at this. 17 was Kenneth Arnold, and 40 was this guy. And they happened a good physical distance away, but that was just the order they listed him in Grudge. And Hynek, who did the summary of all of these at the end of Grudge, made a very succinct note saying, don't take these chronologically. This is just the order we got the files, where we started examining them, and it took a while. Some of them they examined really quickly and they were like, oh, this is nonsense. Other ones they examined for a long time. Incident 40 was one of the ones they examined for about 4 years. And
Wow.
that gives you kind of a sense,
Yeah. Well, when in your article you wrote that that the report goes on to marvel these two best assessed entirely independent cases should agree so closely concerning the shape of the object and its maneuverability. The report further describes Incident 40 as being, quote, one of the most crucial in history of these objects, and recommends a continued investigation in the gathering of more evidence. What was it about this that struck Hynek and the investigative team as being, one of the most crucial in history?
Mostly because it so closely matched Incident 17. In the description, this guy had photographs. The Kenneth Arnold one, they had drawings. The descriptions lined up very closely. They weren't flying saucers, but they were something flat.
Yeah.
And there was something that was concave on the end. And that's what Kenneth Arnold described, even though the newspapers never paid any attention to that. And then suddenly they go look at this one and it's like, oh, here's a flat thing with a concave thing on the end. And I think that was a big selling point, particularly for Hynek. Um, there were people on the Project Grudge and later Project Blue Book team who were still trying to discredit this event, and really all of them, as much as they could. But they were like, wow, there's too many similarities. And this took place on opposite north-south ends of the country, very close. Neither one of them could have known about each other. So I think they found that, to be a like too much of a coincidence, and it did seem very much the same. So yeah, I think that's where they drew that from. When Hynek wrote his final report, which we published in there, he had multiple categories of sightings that he had evaluated, and there was like 1, 2, and 3 with subsections. Some of them were they felt easily explainable: meteorological phenomena, natural phenomena, known aircraft, things like that. And then down at the bottom in section 3, there was one section that section 3A was basically, this is a report we got, but there's no data. No, they haven't provided us with enough to look at. We can't say that it's a bird or a balloon or anything, but we just don't know because they didn't give us anything. And then there was 3B. 3B was in terms of the current UAP studies and the government reports. That was the other category where they submitted data, where there was evidence, and we still didn't find an answer. And Incident 17 and Incident 40, the one we're talking about, and the original one, they both fell into the 3B category, and that was Hynek's conclusion. It didn't mean they knew absolutely what it was, but they were saying, we got a lot of evidence to look at, but we don't know what either of these things are.
Did Rhodes, did he ever do interviews? After this, did he remain kind of a part of the UFO community, or did he kind of disappear after all of this?
Not really. Rhodes was well, that's probably a bad way to put it. He did do a number of interviews with UFO magazines of the time and things like that. In fact, that was brought up during the investigation. It was suggested by the investigative team that he was trying to sell pictures because he was trying to find a way to sue the government to get his negatives back and his photos because he wanted to sell pictures apparently, which didn't really make a lot of sense either. But yeah, he did keep showing up. That you can find interviews. He did some pieces. Oh, that was one of the accusations that was levied against him, that he had actually accepted money for an interview with one of the UFO magazines to talk about his experience. You know, so take that for what you will. But really, it just sounded like the guy was trying to get his negatives back. And we have the paper trail. There are custody slips that we published at the debrief. Showing because one of the investigators towards the end tried to make the case. It's like, this guy's asking for his negatives. We don't even know if he ever turned them in. This could all be nonsense, you know? And then you go look, and they've got custody sheets where the negatives were in the position at Wright-Patterson. They got sent to this laboratory that does analysis of photos, and back to another command, and back to Wright-Patterson. You can follow it. They may have lost it by the end of the investigation, which I guess it's possible. But coming out and saying, we don't know if he ever even sent him. No, that was nonsense. He had him. But the investigative team, another thing I wanted to bring up, and we cover that in the article, is this isn't something that turned up months or years later. This guy had the sighting. He took the photos. He called the local newspaper in Arizona and gave them, they didn't get the negatives, but he gave them copies because he was also an amateur photographer. He had his own darkroom in his shed out there. And they published them. The government was on it within 24 hours. They had already contacted the newspaper long before they contacted this guy and said, hey, we want those photos. And the newspaper gave them the photos. And they were looking into it in 48 hours. And then when they finally arranged an interview with him, it was almost a month later. It was in August, a little more than a month later, actually. That's when the Men in Black thing came up, which tickled my fancy so much because it was the coolest thing, because they have the on-record statements. There were two agents, after they thought they had gathered enough information about what a bad American he was and how good his photos were and all that. They sent one guy from CIC, the Combat Intelligence Command, which no longer exists. It got folded into another thing, and one guy from the FBI. And they made arrangements to go meet him, and their mission was to go talk to him, to interrogate, get information from him, and they wanted the negatives. And the FBI guy they sent was not involved in any of this stuff. He was just this FBI guy. And he got this assignment to go with this other person. It's like, you have to go talk to this guy, ask these questions, try to get this material. And it's right there in the record where he stated he was told before they went they were not to identify themselves by their agency or by their names. They had badges, and they were only to say, we're representatives of the United States federal government. And that's all they said. And the FBI agent, in his statement that he gave for Project Grudge, said, I thought that was kind of weird. But then again, it's really none of my business. I was given the assignment. I went and did my thing and I left, But think about it. If you got two guys in dark black suits who show up at your door and want to ask you questions and tell you need to turn over your UFO evidence, and then they leave and they disappear and you never see them again and you never get your evidence back, is that not sort of the iconic definition of black encounter? They weren't aliens. These are real agents. We know their names. We have their history. But poor guy never found out about it. Nobody, they didn't come forward to talk about it, during their careers or their lives. But yeah, they took his pictures, the copies that he had, and they said, we want the negatives. He said, okay, but they're not here. I need a day to get them. And the next day he had to go retrieve them from wherever they were, and he gave them to him. And this guy spent years trying to get those negatives back, and he never did.
Wow.
But I
And
mean, does it sound like the Men in Black to you?
well, yeah, and
No, it
imagine if
definitely
you have
does.
if you just have a few agents on record, whether the UFO was seen or not, right? Like, let's just say it was just a testimony. But if you have more than one agent within 48 hours on a single witness, it doesn't that give a little credibility to the same year and other similar reports from Roswell? Seems like even if
Could be.
wasn't an alien, if it was just a testimony, right, or something, that probably they might have treated it similarly.
There's a lot of good
Yeah.
stuff there, Jane, but we don't know
We
the
don't know.
definitive answers. We know the names of the players. Some of them are pretty famous, from Project Blue Book days and everything, who were involved in the investigation. Hynek in particular. Some of them thought it was a really credible sighting and thought the evidence was really good. Others came up with other explanations. One of them was a meteorological report that showed that a thunderstorm had gone through about 2 hours before the sighting when he went out and took the pictures. And they said, well, clearly there was probably a residual wind thing, and it was a big piece of paper that was being blown up in the air. That was actually one of the explanations they offered. And you look at the photos, and it's like, I don't know if that's a UFO, but that's not a piece of paper being blown up in the air, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if it was a tornado, I don't know what a thunderstorm.
Well, yeah, there could have been a tornado,
right.
and well, did they get a lot of tornadoes down there in Arizona? Maybe. But no, I mean, I'm not saying it was a UFO. Well, it was a UFO because it was a flying object that nobody could identify. I'm not saying it was aliens, but this guy took photos of something really weird, and the government, there were so many reports out of Grudge. Like I mentioned already, if you go through the Hynek's entire listing, there were dozens and dozens of ones where they looked at him and they were like, this is garbage. This, you don't have any information for us, and they threw them out. And a lot of them looked like they could be. I went and looked into some of the ones up near me in particular, in Hudson Valley. And they were either, I saw a weird light in the sky and I called the police and they didn't do anything. Like that was the whole report. There's not much you can do with that, but there were some that were pretty strong, and Hynek liked this one, and it was one of a relatively small group out of the total from that period. That one, along with Incident 17, where there was either drawings or photographic evidence and multiple witnesses, and like I said, you don't hear this about the Incident 40 thing, even in the few reports that are out there. But weeks into the investigation, they went over to a military laboratory and they found two people who came out and said, wow, we saw that too. That was really weird. And nobody interviewed them except for that one report. And they never spoke to the actual witness. They didn't speak to Rhodes, but yeah, it was a strong case, I think. We still don't know for sure. But I in this entire investigation, I was more interested in the way the government handled the investigation than the actual reality of, was this a flying disc? Was this a UFO? Well, we know as much as I guess we're ever going to know about that. Far more interesting was the government response, and particularly the Men in Black angle. I was like, was this a one-off? I mean, anybody listening to me tell this, anybody reading the article, you got to ask yourself, was this just a weird thing they thought up on that day? Like, oh, wait a minute, let's not tell this guy who we are. Let's gaslight him a little,
Yeah.
maybe. Or was that common practice because they were investigating a lot of cases? And was that something they were doing regularly? Like, we'll look a little more threatening if you don't know who we are and we want your stuff and we're from the government and you don't want to screw with us.
Yeah.
Was that a common practice? We don't have proof of that, but show me somebody that's found better evidence than this file of an actual Men in Black case. We got a lot of them from, historical stories you see in documentaries and things like that. Find me another Men in Black case, because I'm looking right now,
Yeah.
from government records where somebody admitted that they were told, they were instructed to go show up at somebody's house and say, We're from the federal government. We'd like your negatives.
Can I
You know,
spook you guys out a little bit?
Yeah,
There's
sure.
a
please
case.
spook
I
away.
will not tell you when it happened. I will not link the article. But there was an account. I did not firsthand experience anything. But there were rumors of secondhand experience of that and evidence being collected, and I was able to independently verify that that might have happened, and I will not touch that case again. And I spoke on the phone as well with somebody who gave me a certain account. But anyways, I'll just say I would never report on that again. And my feeling was like, well, this could be government maybe, and who am I to
Give it
keep
to Jazz.
pressing
Give it
on
to
this?
Jazz. Maybe
Oh,
Jazz will
no, no, no,
spook
no,
him.
no. I don't want to. I don't even want to. I'm sure people like look super hard. They could probably find it in the archives of my website, which is practically de-indexed on Google anyway. So I will keep it there. I will never delete it, but I'll
Yeah.
keep it there. People can, figure out themselves if they really want to.
Well, I
But
wouldn't want to
I have
out
never
you, but
heard. I have never
ugh.
heard an account like that where like you have an agent's name and you can like there's actual documented proof. I've heard stories, there's like those pictures you see online. I think there's like a few out there, but I have never where you actually have names and government files. So this one we can 100% we can add this to the books in my opinion based on what you found as at least a minimal men in black government agents in suits
I think
questioning witnesses.
at the minimal, you got photographic evidence, you got
Yeah.
harassment from the government, you've got theft of property. I mean, those all I feel like fit that time period perfectly. You don't hear a lot about that stuff happening today, though, right? Like I never hear about the Men in Black anymore. I never hear about people getting shaken down for their digital photographs on their computer or anything like that.
I
Just
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 have
being
that one that
brazen
I won't
about it.
elaborate on. I'm pulling the Lue
Yeah.
Elizondo.
Well,
I signed an
maybe I'm wrong.
NDA.
Maybe I'm wrong. I
I
don't know.
didn't,
I don't feel like I hear about him at the veracity that I read about, especially when I was a young kid through all the classic UFO books of people's negatives getting stolen, film being taken, edited, and then returned with almost all the footage missing. Like I feel like that was common ground in the 40s, 50s, and maybe even in the late 60s and 70s. But am I wrong
It
on that,
feels
Jazz? What do
like
you think?
it feels like that back then, but it does go up later. I do agree. We haven't seen any really new good cases, I would say, in the last decade or so. But Nick Redfern has done some great research on Men in Black stuff, and he has some as late as the late '90s. I was going back and looking because I was interested in the same thing you're interested in. Where we've heard these things. There's this big dispute when Men in Black show up in the literature in ufology. It's like sometimes it's like, oh, these are government agents doing something shady. The other half are people that are like, these are aliens that are dressing like Men in Black, trying to pretend to be human, right?
Right.
And if you follow it, I don't have any documentation for anything like that, but that does seem to be the two halves of the Men in Black story. It's like these are aliens that are really bad at pretending to be human, but they come and talk to you and ask you questions, and they don't know how to drink water and things. The other
Right.
half are actual human beings, from all appearances, who show up claiming to be from the government. In the case we found, definitely were from the government, but if you don't want to say lying, heavily deceiving people and being very threatening, and you use the phrase property theft.
Right.
This guy, and little codicil in one of the documents I linked from that article, he said when they came and said they wanted his photographs and negatives, he said, I want these back. And he then started a years-long pursuit trying to get them back because he was doing interviews with other people, and they're like, oh, well, show us the stuff. He said, I don't have it. The guys from the government took it. And then everybody's like, oh, okay. So I think it kind of worked to the government's advantage in later interviews that he couldn't produce the evidence, so everything else was secondhand copies. The originals were gone, but we know various dates we have receipts when they were sitting at Wright-Patterson. We know they were there, and you can still see the pictures today. We printed them, and they're not great pictures, but the guy had a box camera right after a storm of something that was flying by and doing something weird, Not, I think for the time, they're pretty good pictures,
Mm.
I
think they're great.
No, I loved them. And
Yeah.
the next article I'm working on, which is probably going to be another week before it gets out, came from, excuse me, another like breadcrumb trail I found on this one that is actually related to Kenneth Arnold and what happened after his sighting. And there's another really interesting story that there's very few records out there that anybody's ever covered, because Kenneth Arnold wasn't the only person to see the stuff up at Mount Rainier that he saw. And he had somebody else who was actually a journalist who went and was assigned to go find one of these flying discs. And according to him, he found one and he filmed it.
Whoa. And where is that?
Have you seen the film?
The film,
Grudge
the
somewhere?
film exists, and I hate to do this when I'm working on an article. I will do a spoiler for you. The film exists. There's nothing legible on the film. But he took it. This guy was a journalist, but he was also a pilot, and he was flying an Air Force plane that he borrowed because he was also a member of the Air National Guard up there near Mount Rainier. And he had opened the canopy on his plane and taken out an 8mm film and taken 9 seconds of what he was pointing at. But 8mm is like everything's compressed down like this. And the film had like a dot on it, But his description of what he saw, I'm not going to spoil the whole story because there's a little more left to gather. We got a couple of FOIAs.
Yeah, we also don't want to spoil the clicks for the debrief.
Well, I don't mind talking about it. I mean, I think there are so many of these stories, Luis, that I think everybody focuses on the same. What's the best clickbait? Right. What's the best couple of items, the best couple of paragraphs? And we're going to build a whole William Shatner narrated show out of it, right? And under the surface, some of them are more interesting than they actually were made out to be. Some of them a lot less. I mean, I did a thing last year. I got so much hate mail about the Japan Airlines incident,
I like that
which is one of the more famous ones. When I looked into it and we went and dug up all the original documents, that case is so much weaker than it was ever made out to be.
I remember you
And
disappointing me on that one.
Yeah, I mean, me too. It was one of my favorite. It was what, but look, it was a valuable lesson, Jazz. You don't have to be sorry about it. Like I think your point is made perfectly in your article, in that a lot of the information I got on that was from these shows that would talk about these, because there was no book on the Kenneth Arnold topic at the time, or excuse me, the Japanese airline flight. Like it was just, if anything, it was just a chapter in a book. But your article was like perfect because it just showed us all the holes in the story, all the things that they didn't show on the TV show or the edited program, and it was like, God, it's a heartbreaker, but at least now I know, or at least I got a better idea. And now I can move on. I could educate other people. Hey, that thing is not as good as you think it is. Check out this article that Jazz Shaw wrote. I think that's valuable. And I don't know.
I don't want to say
I don't understand the hate
happened.
you get from it.
I've never said nothing happened.
Right.
But everyone made it sound like, we got all this radar and all these people and everybody saw it, and then we moved on. It was like, that's definitely real. The guy says he saw something, but the data doesn't back up a lot of it. So I mean, he still made it. But it's not this great documented case. It's really a single witness case, you know. And take it or leave it.
Well, I think the thing that stuck out for me the most was the fact that the co-pilot was like, "Yeah, I didn't see that." And maybe
I saw town lights or Venus.
Yeah, like he didn't see a craft shaped like a walnut, the size of 2 aircraft carriers, doing 360s around their plane as they're flying 600 miles per hour.
Right.
He did not see that. And that's what I was like. That's what I was led to believe. That these pilots, plural.
Well, because there's that picture with the pilot and
Yeah, and
his
that big
drawing,
walnut.
and
Yeah,
that's
in his drawing, right?
real that comes to mind. Yeah,
Well,
with no
the Kenneth
context.
Arnold thing, like I said, when the next article comes out, I'll be happy to come back and talk about it if you want.
Absolutely.
The Kenneth Arnold sighting. How many of you have watched all of the various documentaries and all the books where the Kenneth Arnold sighting is always cited as, what is it cited as?
The
The
original.
first.
The first, right?
That's the first UFO sighting by a pilot. And then it's like, oh, he saw these things. And there, yeah, a lot of people admit he didn't say they were saucers. The newspaper said they looked like saucers because he said they skipped like saucers, right?
Right.
But beyond that, there's very little question asked. You know, it's like, well, that's what he saw, and that started this whole thing and set it in motion.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, it's probably still a pretty good sighting. But when you see when you see what Project Grudge reviewers said about Kenneth Arnold's sighting when they first went into it, believe me, they were not impressed. You know, so there's always the two differences of opinion. You got to go and look and find. Don't just look at the newspaper headlines and what William Shatner said 30 years later in a documentary. You know,
Right.
go back and look at the actual original documents that were filed. And in some cases, I think we strengthen a lot of these cases. I personally think Incident 40 is a lot stronger than anything we initially thought once we got to the bottom of it.
It should
Some of
also
them,
be unclassified stuff.
oh, it should be.
This
Yeah.
period, all of this stuff should be unclassified from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, maybe the 70s, 80s. I'll get, if the government wants to meet me halfway, and I'll give you the rest of the decades. But eventually, I want the 70s, 80s, and 90s
Yeah,
before I die.
50s was a big time for saucers here, and not just in Texas, but here in Texas. And I pretty much was able to verify that, or the newspapers at the time, that they had towers here near Waco, Texas, former Air Force Base, that was to detect flying saucers because it was so prevalent. So it's like I'm sure there's some grudge sightings on that I've still yet to uncover, right? Like, so yeah, 40s, 50s, I don't know, discs, maybe saucers. Yeah, not actually, I definitely don't think saucers the best term, because all of those incidents that I find, it's a little more intricate than that, the way the shapes are described. And yeah, I don't think that's an accurate description. Yeah, 40s, 50s. Boy, yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
I'd love to.
I had a great time writing the article. But I realize people don't get it in the background. Instead of just looking at something and dashing something off, that article that we're talking about, that took almost a month. And it involved multiple FOIAs that I sent in. It involved so many afternoons of unpaid work going through the National Archives and then going and sending emails and saying, do you have a better copy of this? Things like that. And getting all of it. And I wasn't the first one. People have looked into these things before, but if you write a report that doesn't match the narrative, it doesn't get a lot of attention. But I don't want to rely on somebody else's reporting for a thing like this. I want to go and get the actual government documents, and get statements. And we got all that and put it together. I think we built a pretty strong case. It doesn't mean we've definitively said Incident 40, absolutely aliens, but also this guy wasn't some communist with a Russian mother who was just trying to trick everybody.
Right.
Who
And that didn't go to
stupidly
church.
put out his story on the day the Roswell story broke. It was just, there's a question that I'll leave for the audience, and I don't have an opinion on this. Roswell, there was a crash somewhere a little while in the same period. There were other witnesses, and by the time we get done with the investigation we're doing, there's like 4 or 5 of them that all happened in like a 3-week period. Was there a crash at Roswell? Was it one of the things that some of these other people saw before Roswell, like Kenneth Arnold? Is that what wound up crashing because they look so similar and they're seeing things veering around? The next article's got a great sketch of what the vehicles describe. It looks like it's going erratically in a Z and then dropping out of sight like it was having problems. And no proof yet, obviously, probably won't be. But you hear these descriptions and it's like, well, wait a minute. was that thing going erratically only about 80 miles north of there, and then it just dropped down into Roswell? Is that where this came from? Is there a connection? I mean, they're fascinating things to think about,
They're
until we
crazy.
get
Yeah.
a new great headline, next week out of the modern era.
I
It's fun stuff.
I will
Yeah, we're
always
part of a
think
big group of ships.
I will always think with Jane's theory that it was a craft that hit a windmill
Or hit a
during
weather
a light,
balloon.
that,
Yeah.
or
I
that
love
hit a
that
weather
Texas
Hit the
story.
sky balloon.
that hit a weather balloon, that hit a windmill, that was during a lightning storm.
Yeah.
And then
Uh,
they buried the alien near a tree, and they refused to let anybody dig it up. So I still love that
exactly,
Texas
Yeah,
story.
that's late
exactly.
1800s. Yeah, it's good.
Real
Yep.
quick before that we transition to the next thing I want to ask you about. We got a $5 donation from Ryan B. Who says a guy named Jazz, Fresh Prince, talk about Men in Black after Will Smith, Chris Rock. Look into it. We're gonna brush that cannot happen and us not talk about it. I feel like every show, no matter what the topic, is gonna give their 2 cents on what happened last night at the Oscars. But we'll get to it. Dorothy Hawkins with a $5 super stickers. Thank you so much, my lady. Truly appreciate the donation. And then G West with a $5 donation. This might sound crazy, but the 2 photos of the UFO in Jazz's article almost resembles the Batman balloon UFO. Just my opinion. Well, we definitely know that Batman balloon definitely did not exist in the 1950s.
40s, yeah.
Or 40s, yeah.
Yeah,
Time
no,
traveling
it wasn't a
balloons.
balloon.
Time traveling
Time
balloon.
travel, rather.
Oh, we've cracked the case. It was
Yep,
a time traveling Batman balloon. Problem solved. We're closing the debrief.
Time traveling Batman balloons that are operated by dolphins inside those craft filled with salt water.
Problem solved.
Problem
Let's go.
solved.
Let's go fix the
Done.
multiverse.
Sounds like a new T-shirt. Jazz, I'm
By the way,
curious to know-
everybody, order
yeah.
the T-shirt.
Order the T-shirt. Link is
Sweet.
in the description. That's
Looking
our
Also
good.
dolphin
the
Tic
mug.
Tac. Look at that, my man. You're the best. I wanted to ask you about because I haven't talked to you about this yet, and also give you an apology because we had a private discussion about sort of my clap back at somebody about ufology and how we need to destroy it, and you quickly pointed out to me like, hey man, there's a lot of great journalists, investigators, researchers that have done a lot of great work, and I absolutely 100% agree with that. It was more directed at the folks who are taking advantage of people. The research that isn't good, that sounds fantastical, but when you dig into it, it doesn't really go anywhere. And it's a weird line to define. And there's people on both sides of the fence. I don't want to get dragged into this, but I just wanted to say, hey, you were right. And I apologize and thank you for pointing that out to me. Because
apologize.
No. I just want
conversation that was out there,
Right. No, but I just wanted to, again, like there are moments where I'm wrong. And when somebody that I respect comes to me and they say, hey, I think you're wrong on this, I got to sit back and go, oh, shit, maybe I was wrong on that. And so, I just wanted to thank you for that. But really, I just wanted to get your opinion on John Greenwald's latest FOIA victory with these 17 new pages from the classified version of the ODNI UAP report. What were your initial thoughts?
There was, I thought, a fair amount of good stuff in there. Not good stuff in, oh, here it is, we have definitive proof. But good stuff in terms of we have a better idea of the categories, even though they're redacted, of the stuff that was being shown in the classified report and probably in the classified briefings. And some of that might even provide a few fishhooks to go and FOIA some other stuff in the future. John took, God, it was a year at least to go. As soon as they said there was a classified report that was released, he immediately asked for it. He was immediately denied. He turned around and filed a mandatory declassification request. And amazingly, they came back and said, oh, you're right. We can release this if we keep some of it redacted. And he got the report, and there were some intriguing hints in there. There was nothing groundbreaking. There was like, oh, here's Skinny Bob. We're not going to get that. Bob Lazar was right the whole time. That was on page 16.
Right.
We didn't get any of that, but they were clearly being shown things that included, at a minimum, drawings, probably either photos or still captures from videos. And we've heard, like from Chris Mellon, that in other briefings they've actually seen longer, better videos. So I think they were compiling the minimum amount of that they could put together to get away with, to say, okay, we fulfilled the request. A lot of questions have been raised on social media. I've been watching them, and I hate being involved in this more than I could possibly tell you. Like, oh no, the actual report was 70 pages long. I've had a few chats with a couple of people about this, and I think there's a huge file that's 70 pages or even longer that the task force had, but they didn't turn the whole thing over to Congress. They're turning over the minimum they can do to get away with saying we complied with the congressional demand. So I think there was a very large file with a lot more stuff, and they took out 17 pages and included some juicier bits, and they were like, okay, here you go. Here's the classified version. This is what we've been working on. We've seen these weird shaped things and all this, and we've complied with your request. And they turned it in and they walked away. I mean, that's, to me, having dealt with the government for so long, that makes the most sense. They can't turn around and just go, I'm sorry, Congress, you don't have a right to know. F you. We're leaving. Because then they lose their budget, because then some of them go to jail. They have to comply. It doesn't mean they have to go over and above the bar and like, oh, well, we should find everything we could possibly get and give it to you right now. No, they've been lying about this crap for 70 years and more. So they gave them probably the bare minimum that boiled down to 17 pages. A much smaller portion of it got put out to the public without the somewhat juicier bits. But no, I do believe that John is on the trail that someday may lead to a much larger task force report that has everything everybody wants to know about. How much of that really is a danger to national security if it gets released? How much of it is stuff they really just don't want to talk about? How much of it might lead to a paper trail to say, well, some of you people have been doing naughty things you shouldn't have been doing? I think the questions run the gamut, but I don't believe we know those answers yet. But I'm really pleased that John got it, and I think that gave us some interesting things to follow in the future and some hints. There were names on there that I looked at, and I've already filed a couple of FOIAs, of people we hadn't seen before, and a couple things with offices that really hadn't been explored. And every time you get something new from them, they frequently put in a few items, a few breadcrumbs where you can go look at it and go, oh, we should FOIA that, So I don't know if I'm going to live to see it, but I think you guys, I think you could live to see amazing times. It might take decades before we get to the bottom, but I think John is doing yeoman's work, and and it's not just him. There's a lot of people out there working on this stuff, and I'm thrilled to see how far we've come.
No, I think, and it's to answer Christopher Plain's question, the highlight of it for me was that Christopher Mellon and Lue Elizondo were right in that this stuff is overclassified. Not only just the UAP UFO stuff, but all of the stuff across all intelligence agencies. I can't imagine if they're classifying shapes. I mean, like, we already kind of know what the shapes of these things are. We've seen examples of them, I think, even given out by the Air Force or other military agencies. I mean, we've all seen the shapes. The graphs are already online.
You can look at my YouTube channel. You can see like 3 of the shapes.
Batman balloon.
You can tell us that.
Yeah,
no, I agree.
And also, there was also just like, there were other things in there that were just classified that just didn't need, like, words, just one word.
Right.
Like, what's going on here? And it almost feels like we could have seen this last June, and what we should have gotten through this request, and maybe we'll get it next year. But today, I feel like we should have gotten all of that stuff, most of it redacted. as far as the reports and the names in the reports and the
Totally
shapes,
agree.
all of it. We should have that today. And that's
Totally
what I
agree.
think, it just gives us another sort of arrow in the quill, so to speak, when we do the big phone home and what we're going to concentrate on. And of course, declassification of this subject, I think is one of the best ones, because it also allows us to say, hey, this doesn't benefit just the UFO discussion. This benefits national security, because if stuff is getting overclassified at this level, that means that information isn't flowing properly, which means that that could leave a major blind spot in our national security, like a 9/11, or say drones, swarms of drones flying with canisters of anthrax on them and bombing a popular destination.
Sure.
Like those
Yep.
those are all things that are important and that should be declassified. And I think for me, that was the biggest highlight. And also just that there was
Remember what
the
Avril
report
Haines
was
said.
bigger than 7 pages, which is nice to also see. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's good to see. But remember what Avril Haines said, and she didn't say it in a classified setting or anything, in a very public. She came out as the DNI and said, we have a massive overclassification problem, and this is something that other people have been screaming from the rooftops for decades. But now we have somebody at one of the highest levels in the government saying, yes, we have a massive overclassification problem. And the military does not want to hear that, because they think we have a massive underclassification problem, because it's none of your business what we're doing ever, right? And that's kind of been, particularly from the Air Force, the attitude. But we do have people in high ranks that are not former officials, people that are serving right now at very high levels. So, man, if these guys can just get their act together, and I'm not saying they don't have their act together, if they can coordinate well enough, and this gets pushed and we get more people in Congress through things like the big phone home, the next one, to say, this is important. Don't be silly. Don't just hide stuff for no reason. Your own top people are saying, you need to be able to share this and get more people involved in these questions. Scientists, yes, the public, you know, rank and file military members, everybody, you know. And I think that's kind of what Avril Haines was saying and leaning towards. And if we can get more people in Congress to step forward and go, no, you're overclassifying stuff. We're not accepting this, because they do have avenues to go and say, enforce declassification. At some level, you might have to go get the president to do it. I've not seen any sign that the current president has any interest in
No.
talking about this subject. But if enough people in Congress, particularly from his own party, can go and get him interested and go, look, you got to get off the fence. You can declassify some of this stuff with the stroke of a pen.
Mm.
And he can literally declassify anything he wants to.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say I'm hopeful, but I'm keeping my eyes open to the possibility that the things you're talking about, do the next big phone home, talk to members of Congress, get that through. One of the big things we're fighting is classification. And if the tide shifts, then there could be a day where there's nowhere for anyone in the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies to hide.
You know
Everybody's
what I
going to
would
come out and go
I
ahead.
was just what I think would be an amazing short-term, even long-term sort of win for this community. And when I say that, I mean the UFO UAP community at large, is if this was the community that spearheaded the effort, that got things declassified, that was able to enable our pilots and service and military members to report these weird looking things in the sky. And it was because of our efforts that, oh my God, yes, you were right. There are drones with canisters of crazy chemicals. And yes, they were planning a terrorist attack. And because we got this declassified, we were able to thwart that before it was able to be, implemented. So I think, again, like, there are so many things that we can accomplish through this discussion that I think would be very helpful to not only the everyday American citizen, but again the national security apparatus as a whole. Because I mean, look, we're living in a strange times, and technology is going to bring some very weird things that we never expected. Like nobody ever expected box cutters and a couple of radios would take down the two most iconic towers on the planet. So this idea that drones wouldn't be able to cause a major loss of life and embarrassment to the national security apparatus it's not as far-fetched as people think. And if this is the community that helps solve that problem, that's a win for us. And that's something we can hang our hat on and say, hey, listen, we helped get this accomplished. Could we also maybe get a little more transparency from the Air Force, say, on the actual diamond in the rough, the other bucket, the thing that we all really are here for? I think that's valuable, right?
Oh, it's not just valuable. And on top of that, I would say, think how many people are there out there, both military and civilian, who have had interactions with unknown phenomena. This is something that came up in the Gillibrand Amendment, who have had lifelong physical effects, people who have died. There's records. How cool would it be? Cool's the wrong word. I apologize. How gratifying would it be if the community got together and actually opened up that information and said, there's other people out there who are still suffering, and you need to come up and pony up and tell us what the hell's going on, and maybe we can save some of these people if we know what the hell's wrong with them. Wouldn't that be worth everything? Forget
absolutely.
the UFO stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that just be the ultimate, this was a good cause?
Right.
I mean, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yes. And I think that's, I think it's, we don't see it because we're so short-sighted. We only want the bodies and the craft. And we also need to realize that there's a bigger discussion here that we can also influence, that I think can be used as currency down the road to possibly get what we're really looking for.
Oh, I want the bodies in the craft.
I do too.
I don't lie about it.
I would love to see the bodies in the craft.
I'm not saying they exist, but if they do, I want to see them.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'd love to as well.
We talked about this on other shows in the past. I mean, don't get me wrong. This stuff's really important to me, particularly with the things that my wife and I have seen. It's really on our minds. There's a bunch of other government secrecy stuff, that we really deserve to have answers. And it's not just UFOs, it's not just the Kennedy assassination. There's a ton of stuff, and we haven't been well served, in my opinion. And I think we need to do better. And if we get a big victory on this, maybe that opens a pathway for people to say, oh, citizens actually have power. Citizens have the ability, if we get together, talk to our representatives, go in legal channels and go, we need declassification. We need to do this. Just telling us it's none of your business is not a good enough answer. We can leave UFOs behind, Luis. I mean, that's my dream. I probably won't live to see it, but I would love to see that happen, where the deepest intelligence and military assets finally have real oversight from the elected legislative representatives of the people and go, no, that's not a good enough answer anymore. I'm sorry. You can't just say, oh, well, that might be dangerous or national security is none of your business. No, you have to do better. And I want them to do better.
Yeah, no, I think we all do. Well, Jess Shaw, that was a wonderful hour. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for, you're on the East Coast, so thank you for staying up a little late for us. And always, like I said, always being on speed dial and always providing great work and great research for us to consider when we're talking about this topic. So
do the best I can, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll see you soon, my good sir.
Take care.
Thanks, Jess.
All right, guys. That was Jazz Shaw.
The one and only.
The one and only.
Well, I have a heart for any story featuring a saucer, even though that might not be the the best
anything
term.
Well, he told me about
and
this
the Men in
article.
Black too.
He told me about it about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago maybe, and was like Men in Black. I was like, you got my ears perked, or what do you got? So
Man, the synchronicity. I mean, it was all about the
yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. So transitioning
Yeah.
into the probably the strangest,
Men in Black.
awkward moment in the history of definitely the Oscars and probably live television. Now that I'm thinking of it, I can't think of
Who
anything.
saw it live?
What's that?
Did you guys see it live?
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm an
I was so
actor. I hate
disappointed I
award
didn't.
shows. Well, it didn't actually the part where, because the it's obviously the live broadcast is on a delay, but they didn't have the part where he sat down and started yelling profanities back at Chris Rock about keeping his wife's name out of his mouth. But it was online immediately. Somebody had I guess the broadcast feed for the show. It was, I think it was a Japanese Twitter account that put it out first, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's where I saw it first. But yeah, it was. Jane, what were your thoughts when you saw sort of the aftermath of all of this?
I was putting my son to bed during all of this earth-shattering moment, and so I was like none the wiser. So my husband was just like so excited to show it to me. He wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't tell me. He was just like, I'm gonna show it to you just so you can react.
I'm curious what you think. Like, do you think he was justified in his actions?
No. I think if you were to put a normal husband who's not a public persona in that situation, especially alongside maybe a wife who's not a public persona, that's different. Maybe you go to a comedy show and the stand-up comedy heckles your wife, or it's like you're in a bar and somebody you don't know like makes a joke right about your wife. That's one situation, and I can understand being a wife. I can understand that mentality. But by that means no female, that means Jada Pinkett Smith is like the only female celebrity that can't be made fun of. Because her husband's Will Smith. So all the other female celebrities, they can be made fun of? Or is this just you're not allowed to make fun of female celebrities? And I know there's more to the story, but to me, comedy in a way, like this free dialogue we have is like a very sacred category for me. And so I feel defensive of Chris Rock and comedians but yeah, I mean, shoot, that's my hot take.
That's your
on
hot
somebody
take
I
on
don't know,
it.
which is so refreshing, and I don't have any relationship with, and who will never find out what I think. So
yeah, exactly.
Easy to have a hot take.
Gnome Squatch says it looks staged. I can tell you without a doubt, 100%, this was not staged.
I don't think it was staged.
It was not staged at all. This was
pure
raw emotion, and it was surprising. There's no doubt. But rather, what's your hot take that we'll never get to Will Smith?
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, right? You want to believe that people can behave themselves, and yeah, I think it definitely crossed the line, and where's security, right? Like,
I am more shocked from a production standpoint. And I saw Bryce Zabel write something about this. And Bryce Zabel is a professor of film at, I believe, USC, and also is part of the Motion Academy Picture Association, one of those associations that has to do with the Academy Awards and award shows. And he was disgusted at the fact that he wasn't immediately escorted out. Like he should have been, he should have been escorted out and asked to leave the premises after physically assaulting someone. As a comedian, as a guy who's been on stage and has had awkward moments on this show with guests, I thought Chris Rock handled that beautifully, as best as you possibly can. I have a feeling once the show was over and he got to think about it, it probably really pissed him off. But he didn't press charges. And it sucks.
Yeah. I wish the Academy pressed charges. I can get Chris Rock like not wanting to be like, I want to press charges, but he should have charges pressed against him. Will Smith should 100%.
Well, I think he could still get sued. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think you have to press charges to sue him for something like that.
Well, I've heard that like you don't even need the party that got assaulted to press charges. Like a third party can press charges, and he could be arrested for that,
Can
even
the
if Chris Rock
public,
doesn't
can the
want him to.
FCC, like, can people like, hey, I was watching this with my kid. He's a fan of Will Smith, and I thought I was watching the Oscars, and I just watched like an assault on stage.
Yeah, I mean,
don't know how that works.
I'd like to have
remember
some
the Janet
accountability,
Jackson
right?
incident,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
like, remember that? Like, that was like a whole thing, right? So I wouldn't. This is kind of similar, right?
Well, I just think it's a great example of how ultra powerful, ultra rich people live in a different world, a completely different world than you and I. You and I do that.
Can you imagine doing that?
Arrested on the spot, especially if it happened in a hotel or a place that arrested on the spot, and rightfully so. If I had done something,
and you would know
like
you
that.
were going to get arrested. Like, if you, let's say you were standing up for your wife, you would know what was going to happen next, and you'd be like, okay, it's worth it, I guess.
Yeah,
but there's no other fate.
That
happened.
I was telling these guys before the show. This one, I'm so happy it happened, because I think it's gonna really transition nicely into what we're gonna talk about next. This idea of, like, for a long time idolized Will Smith. I follow him, and I follow him because of his positivity image, his positive message that he spreads, especially on his Instagram, and the video he edits, and the people around him that he elevates to new levels. He uses his power to actually elevate voices, elevate talent. He's an amazing actor. He deserved an Oscar way before this film. Way before this film. One of the first music videos I've ever saw was Parents Just Don't Understand. In his music, he doesn't put curse words because of children possibly listening to his music.
Independence Day is one of my favorite alien
Independence Day, Men in Black, like, these are two iconic alien movies, especially Independence Day.
I think we've reviewed them both for Weird Hollywood.
Theater.
I watched it at the Alamo Draft House here in Austin for something. It's a comedy thing, and the scene where they the president gives the big speech at the end. The President Bill Pullman. They put the words up to the speech, so we all put our hand over the heart and gave the speech together.
And cheered after.
So great. Yeah. It's a great movie.
Dude, but yeah, I mean, it's like, of all the people on the planet, I would have never expected this from him. And this is a perfect lesson of not attaching infallible characteristics and morality to your heroes. Because guess what? Even your heroes are human. Sometimes they have really, really, really bad days, and they lash out in ways that is uncharacteristic of their body of work. So am I going to judge Will Smith's entire career based off of this one event? No. But if he did it again, then I could definitely put the nail in the coffin on Will Smith. I don't think this will ever happen again with him. I don't think this is going to hurt his career.
He slapped somebody before, but it was just like a pop on the cheek.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a water bottle.
This was a full-blown, cocked.
He lost.
He could have knocked him out.
He
could have knocked him out. Imagine if he had knocked him out. Oh my God. The trouble he would have, I think he would have been in. He didn't get arrested last night, which is shocking. I'm shocked that the LAPD wasn't at his door this morning. I'm shocked, honestly. But this idea of putting your heroes are going to let you down sometimes, but that does not mean that their message gets erased. That does not mean what they fought for is invalid. We were talking about this on the Discord link in the description. Please join our conversations on Friday nights about there have been many, many flawed heroes in history. People who have changed the course of humanity. Martin Luther King Jr. cheated on his wife and probably hated gay people. He was a Southern Baptist preacher in the 60s. Gandhi slept with underage girls. Like, these are all massive flaws. Magic Johnson. There's so many people that you could list that had just made terrible decisions.
Mhm.
And that's expected. You should expect that from your heroes. And when they do it, depending on, of course, the veracity of the incident, like, I mean, I don't think like OJ Simpson. I'm never going to buy an OJ Simpson jersey or watch any of his stuff, go to seek out, a golf, tournament with OJ Simpson. Like, I would never, ever, ever give my time of day to someone like that. But someone who makes a human mistake, an emotional mistake, I think for me, depending again, you got to take every instance as it happens. But I think this idea again of putting your heroes on this pedestal where they can't make mistakes is going to set yourself up for disappointment. And I was disappointed last night in Will Smith, and it was a great lesson along with the last month of the show of just always reminding yourself that humans are going to human. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do stupid stuff. We're all monkeys. Who just said that on our show the other day? Like we're all gonna be, or that was in the Discord. We all do weird things in our private life that we would never, ever, 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 ever have come out into public. And sometimes they do. But you and I aren't Will Smith, so it doesn't get blown up to the proportion of these things. But people have bad days, and they're allowed to have bad days. And sometimes you got to give context to those bad days. But anyway, yeah, I thought that was an interesting lesson in sort of in heroes. And again, it transitioned into sort of what we're talking about next. I'm assuming that's why a lot of folks are here. The tweet of Faceless Bureaucrat. Now, I have a feeling people think we're beating a dead horse with this, but
before we get into what everybody wants to hear about. Oh my gosh, commercial break, guys.
Delay it some more.
Let's just say there was somebody else. There was a Linda Moulton Howell, a moment that happened. We don't need to go there, but I do feel like it is this theme, and people are doing live streams more frequently, more often than ever. This wasn't the Oscars was live, and it does feel like people are just being human, just right in front of our own eyes. I just wanted to
for sure
delay things and really frustrate
Linda Moulton Howell's
people
a great
for a minute.
example. I mean, for me, that was a moment where I'm like,
another one.
Okay, like for me, that was a moment that solidified my opinion of the work. And
I did a positive, and I felt disappointed by that as well. But But then I did a positive Instagram post about her that I really felt sincere about and was just looking forward. So so that's just some context going into.
No, you make a good point. Eventai with a $5 donation. 2 years of pandemic makes people crazy too. Yes, absolutely.
That's definitely a factor.
I'm not gonna let that excuse ride with Will Smith. That guy's been out of his house running around on a huge lot of acreage. I've been stuck in a 2-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles for 2 years. Two totally different kinds of crazy. But yes, totally agreed. But yeah, so I mean, we're getting to this Faceless Bureaucrat tweets, but I want to preface this conversation with, this is not something we're doing for clicks. We've taught, this is something our show's gotten a lot of heat about, and we've talked about these tweets, but nobody's ever actually looked at them. And so we put out a couple of feelers and saw, if anybody has a collection of these tweets, and we found a pretty big one. And we're going to go through a couple of them now. But again, this is not something that we're putting on the screen as a case closed. This person's lying. We're going to try and leave all of our personal emotions and attachments to this conversation out of these tweets. We're going to judge them individually as they come up, and you guys decide if it's appropriate. And then we'll talk at the end of it, after we go through whatever tweets we want to go through. We'll talk at the end of it and decide, does this even matter? Like, is this going to matter in 4, 5 years, 3 years, next year when we have in public hearings? Or is anybody going to remember these tweets? Maybe not. But let's go through the tweets. I think it's something that we should do primarily because nobody's ever done it before. Not that I've seen. Nobody's ever gone through these tweets before. And I know Rather has made some claims about these tweets. And people have said, "Oh no, there's no defamatory things." I went through. I think. Well, let's get into it. Rather, which tweet do you want to pull up first?
Where do you want to start?
Where do you want to start, Rather? I mean, look, I went through a lot of these tweets. I think most of them are pretty tepid as far as
neutral or positive, even, right? There's a
lot of them are neutral or positive. A lot of them are encouraging.
Hey, I'm thinking of you, or
like, oh, I heard Pittsburgh's a great state. I'd love to visit it sometime. Stuff like that. I think
he talks about losing his mother at one point. Yep. And how he relates to somebody else who's lost their mother, and to hang in there, and so he's reaching out to people.
He talks a lot about people's mothers. For example,
okay. Yeah. All right,
so I just wanted to start out with I would say the more than 50% though. Would you say of the tweets, Lou?
I say about 10% are inflammatory.
10%.
90% are pretty positive. A lot of them are positive. I have a problem with the positive ones, really, because he's, giving people support from this weird sock puppet place where.
Well, no, hold on. Wait a second. We keep saying he, and we have to preface this conversation also. There is no 100% definitive proof that this account belonged to Lue Elizondo.
I mean, I'm 100%.
We have. You're 100? 100?
Of course. I asked him.
I mean, he gave us
what about the faceless bureaucrat? He said, no, faceless bureaucrat currently is not his. I asked him, what about prior to November of 2021? He wouldn't answer that question. He immediately deflected, saying, oh, what would you do if I told you your mother was a prostitute?
Sure, right.
And I'm pretty sure that's, if he'll deny that the current one is him, but he won't deny that the other one.
I will give you that.
It's 100%.
I will give you in the interview that I said it sounds like a soft yes, and he didn't dispute that question. So, and again, this is just a secret. Like, this is, if you're in UFO Twitter, everyone pretty much is convinced or on the same page that this is Lue. But I have to say it. We don't have 100% proof. Like, we don't.
I just have what we learned in that one stream, because I never interacted. This Twitter account doesn't follow me. I've never interacted with it. I didn't read anything until this show today. So that's, but I will say from reading it, my feeling is this is somebody that is either could be at least very close to Elizondo and seems to know things. And it at least seems to suggest that they are an insider who knows things. So that's from my just complete, and is also constantly supportive of Lue Elizondo. So it does seem to be either a friend of Lue Elizondo or somebody who's like a fan of
a super knowledgeable fan,
and will answer questions on behalf of Lue Elizondo. Yes, so that's just like pure me just reading tweets, knowing nothing. Even if you hadn't told me it was Lue Elizondo and I was just reading the tweets, I think I would actually have come to a similar conclusion, but I can't play that game because I can't go back in time. Yeah. Right. Okay. That's just
all right. Yeah. Okay.
Disclaimer.
So I feel like we've established that. I just
so many disclaimers.
Because look, we're gonna get a lot of BS for this, but I don't care. I think it's important to talk about because, again, this is something that happened on our show. Rather's making accusations. The community's making accusations. It's like, hey, let's just bring up the tweets. Let's address them, and then we'll come up to a conclusion. And then I don't think I ever want to talk about this ever again.
Oh, thank God.
Thank God, right? Like, I don't think we want to do this anymore. But we haven't done it. Nobody else has done it. So let's do it. So here's the first tweet Rather pulls up. And here's another thing is we don't know the context. We don't know what was said before this. That's some of the issues with this, right? So we don't know if there was something threatening to his family or whatever.
It wasn't. There's nothing threatening to his family. Okay, I think that we can agree to that. This is all ad hominem attacks.
Okay, fair. But again, we don't have the other tweets to provide the context. You got to admit that.
we could dig them. I mean, if we wanted to dig them up, but I'm positive that they're not
There
going
were
to be.
some that in that had context.
Yes, of course.
Right.
I'm
But
just,
I guess this one.
again, I'm just
Yeah.
making it 100% clear what
Yeah.
we're trying to say here.
100%.
So this is a response to Single Track, Adam, 5x5 News, and others. Yes, I took the time for my studies in sociology to respond to you. Okay, not really, but I love your response. So my question remains, did Mummy spank you too much, or did Mummy not spank you enough? Smack. Thank you, Mummy. May I have another?
Are we sure this isn't
adding a lot to the conversation, Lou?
Yeah.
Lue Elizondo.
I mean, it's not.
Maybe
What
this is really
this?
Nick
This
Pope
is,
because it sounds like maybe it's a British.
I feel
British
it's very
person.
it's very condescending to me. It's not the most egregious thing I've seen on Twitter. This
I mean,
is like
nothing
pretty mild.
horrible about what he's saying, but he's here he's accusing Mick West of having a fake account, and there's tons of these tweets where he just attacks. He's attacking three people: Mick West, 5x5 News, which is here in the chat, and Keith Clore. And then all of his attacks purely ad hominem. He won't criticize or try to have a debate about what these people are saying, these critics to him. He'll just attack their person. He'll attack 5x5 saying, "Oh, your mommy didn't spank you enough." He'll attack Mick West saying that, "Oh, you're not a scientist, so your opinion doesn't matter." And he'll attack Keith Clore about some Monsanto scandal, which isn't relevant at all to the issues at hand. And this is, I'm upset that Lue Elizondo will do that with his troll account, but the real implication is that he's telling all of his supporters, who he also, gives little attaboys, "Hey, good job, I'm supporting you." He's telling them to do the same thing too, if not directly, which I'm pretty sure he probably was, but indirectly by saying, these are the types of arguments that are acceptable in this sphere, which I don't think they should be. I think we should be attacking, having debates based on the merits of the evidence and the claims, not attacking people and, saying, "Oh, you're a fake account." I mean, come on.
All right, well, let's read this tweet. So this is coming from Detective Dogebert. Says, okay, so why did they set up a consulting firm to give money to charity? Come on now. These dudes are pushing for aliens disclosure so they can position themselves to profit from increased government spending on UAP issue. And yet we don't have any evidence of even what UAPs are. And then he responds, dude, too seriously? Dude,
You seriously.
You seriously. Yeah.
You seriously have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. You must be a Mick West fake account. You're speaking complete nonsense. Once it comes out what Skyfort is, and it will, you'll have to change your Twitter handle to something different. LOL.
Can I tell you what bothers me about this?
Yeah, go for it.
This is going to turn somebody against wanting to know about UAPs and listening to the next report. When I do, I'm not saying I've had perfect moments or I haven't, said something out of line maybe at some point. I hope not. But when I do take the time to engage, my goal is to try to help educate somebody. If I'm seeing somebody that's saying something I just think is just like such BS, I will take an opportunity to link to something that's maybe some evidence they didn't know about. And it's amazing. Anytime you do that, that person then replies and they're engaged and they're learning. And so I get, if this was just anybody tweeting, okay, who cares? Does it matter? But I thought this was like a fellow researcher who had, or not researcher, fellow advocate though, for UFO research, I guess, and educating people. And but so I think that part bothers me, just the approach.
Well, I mean, the idea of being told to set aside our petty differences, right? To come together and try to have a conversation and not exclude anybody through tactics that are unsavory. And this seems like a little bit of an unsavory tactic. And here's the thing is I feel like the community's split right down the middle on this. Some people think that this behavior is okay and not a big deal. And that's fine. If you think that, okay, you have every right to think that. But then you also must give the room for people to not think that. Because there's going to be a part of this community that doesn't think that's cool. That thinks that's not moral. And they already have this idea in their head. The government's lying, Lue's lying, Christopher Mellon's lying. This is all BS. And then they see something like this, and this just confirms it for them. It makes them more fervent, it polarizes them more, I believe. It makes them more extreme in their way of thinking. And it makes it harder for folks like me to be like, hey, dude, let's try and call our lawmakers, because they're so pissed at the idea that they might be manipulated or intel is being gathered on them as we were told. But you were saying something rather.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you think this behavior is acceptable and you're going to, post this type of stuff, don't make your pinned tweet on your main account saying that I'm going to treat everyone with respect and I, will not tell a lie. You're not treating people with respect. I mean, how can you claim that, you're treating someone with respect when you're, making fun of their mom and, calling people idiots and doing all sorts of inflammatory behavior? It really, leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And, the broader implication of this is, what's the judgment behind someone who will post this stuff? If you're going to totally dismiss all of your critics with ad hominem attacks and say, I'm not going to listen to what you're saying because I don't respect you as an individual, don't respect you from where you're coming from. When he was internally at the DOA doing the ATIP stuff, who was he? Was he Lue Elizondo or was he Faceless Bureaucrat when he was having discussions with dissenters and people who might not agree with him? It seems to me that he was probably acting like Faceless. That's probably the true Lue, who would, not really consider people who have contrary opinions than him, which I really do think calls into question a lot of what Lue Elizondo has been saying.
I mean, but couldn't this also be just somebody? This is their release valve. Their secret, right? Like maybe it's valve.
Yeah, and that's why I backed off during the interview when he implied that he had these sock puppet accounts because people were attacking his family. I can empathize with that, and that would make sense to me on an emotional level, and I would give him some room that you should blow off some steam. That's acceptable. Well,
just because
that's not what he's doing here.
Well, hold on a second. But just because we don't see it in a tweet doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that frustration of it happening won't leak in responses here.
So he's taking out his frustration on Mick West, Mike Turber, 5x5, and Keith Clore?
Yeah. I will say, now that I have looked through the tweets, because at the time that I watched that stream, I really was only reacting to how he answered the question. I really had no opinion on if he had an alternate Twitter account. It was more just like how he treated Rather I didn't like. But now that I've gone through the tweets and thinking about what he said and what he implied in the stream, it is completely black and white of what this Twitter account seemed to be about. So, and I will say, I know that you guys are 100% convinced, but I mean, is there any chance that this is just somebody who knows Lue Elizondo and there's multiple accounts out there and there's another one
absolutely
that Lue Elizondo is talking about? Like, that's all I mean,
this isn't the only sock puppet account either.
Right,
there's actually another one that's more disturbing to me. We don't have to talk about it today.
But here's the thing too, like this is not a that strange a tactic. I'll go to sports, for example, like LeBron James. When he wants a narrative put out there are sock puppet accounts that his friends and his agents and he has, and he'll put narratives out there that he wants to control in the press. And that happens, man. Like there's a team of people that do stuff like that. I think the difference is here, though, that's a basketball player. This is an employed subcontractor of the government who has also got the biggest And to be fair, the most credible UFO story ever told in the history of America, who's having laws written, he's having meetings with lawmakers, he's influencing where dollars go. Like,
maybe one of the most important
different.
issues in the world, right? Like, if this is all true, this is society changing. This is huge. Why are you risking all of that, and why are you bringing it down to such a juvenile level?
And you're not claiming that you're here for entertainment or even to play sports to that example. I'm not saying that that's like, I think every job is important and dignified in its own way, whatever. But like, you are like, you're saying that you're a servant, right? And that you're quit these other opportunities, right? To try to serve the public. So there's a lot of narrative around that. So I do think it personally, I do think it matters. Spoiler, what you're saying behind closed doors, what you're saying on public social media. This is not a conversation you're having with your wife or a friend, like in private. You are absolutely impacting what's happening in the community with your tweets. I think I was going to say something else, but it's fine.
What do you got, brother?
Well, Stephen Bourdain, he did, have some good advice to me. And, he's talking about how, there is, human nature where you can not be your best, right? And, maybe we should give him a little bit of slack for that. But
sure.
I also think that to have that slack, you kind of need to admit that you're wrong and stop doing it. And
that's part of it.
That's
part of it, rather. But I think also another part of it falls on us. If this is something that is letting us down, we're setting the expectation too high, right, and we're putting too many perfect qualities on somebody that will never be perfect. Like, there is no perfect messenger for this topic. And I think that's sort of the core of what we got to in our Discord the other night is I don't care who it is, dude. I don't care who it is. We've been begging for somebody like Lue Elizondo and Christopher Mellon to come out. They come out. Every word is hung on every tweet, every interaction. And now we find out that our hero is imperfect and maybe a little petty and maybe just a little sensitive. We want him to be like, I don't need an alt Twitter account. I'll just ignore the BS and go forward, because I know the things that I'm saying are coming to fruition, i.e., the public reports, i.e., the classified reports, i.e., the Gillibrand Amendment and everything that's coming to fruition, public hearings. He called that shot 3 months ago, and it's going to happen. And laws being written, and it's coming. He's suing the federal government. Like, I think his actions for me speak louder than a puppet account. I could be wrong on that. That could turn around and bite me in the ass one day. But if we're upset about this, our expectations are way too high. And this is a lesson in lowering them. That for me, this here means bullshit all. I don't care about it. It doesn't matter to me, to be 1,000,000% honest. What matters is what's happening now in Congress and with lawmakers. Now, people will point, no, this matters. This matters. And maybe in time you will be right. But right now, you're not. Right now, I'm not right.
I think it matters to anybody. Maybe we'll see. I don't know that I don't believe that you put him on a pedestal before, though. Well, no, I don't know. How do you feel? I guess
I have put him on a pedestal. I'll be honest. I've put him on a pedestal because I met him, because I've met his father, because I've interacted with his wife, because I feel like I got skin in the game when it comes to, I don't know him. I've never been to his house.
That's also what's different about like LeBron James and stuff. The people that these all accounts are interacting with, positive or negative, are people he's meeting in person, doing podcasts with, driving views toward, driving subscribers toward.
Right.
So I feel like, I'm sorry, you were saying,
and that's why I'm giving people the room. You have a right to be upset about this. You have a right, rather, to be pissed off. And I'm going to give you that room. Does it mean you're right? No. No. Like, only time will tell what role this Twitter account is going to play in the overall telling of this story. In my opinion, I don't think it's going to play a big part. I don't know how you feel in your opinion. You think the people are going to look back at this and go, okay, this is exactly where we all got screwed, or this is exactly where the lies started falling apart? Maybe, possibly, but only time will be the true teller of that, right?
Totally. And I don't think that it discredits or makes, his accomplishments not the accomplishments. He's accomplished a lot, and I do give him credit, and I respect him for what he's done. But I do question, what value he has to the community now, when he's just offering speculation on what he thinks his opinions are, or not what he thinks his opinions are, but what his opinions are, and everyone takes it as the gospel truth of him shining the light and telling us what's on the inside. When I think it's kind of clear now that that's.
But he's not.
You shouldn't be relying on any of that stuff.
He's not saying just
everyone
that,
does.
though. He's not saying just that. He's also telling us about things coming down the road from a legislative standpoint, and those things are happening.
I don't think anything. There's 0% changes for me is what I think about UFOs and UAP. My interest in the reports, my expectation that there will be more to come. I think I have always felt that Lue Elizondo believes this phenomenon to be real. Actually, I think this account shows that actually he's passionate about it. Maybe to a fault. Like we all can be, and we've all had those conversations, maybe with family and friends, if not on Twitter. And I'm sure a lot of you have on Twitter. So this changes nothing to me as far as like what I think about the actual data and my excitement for the future and everything. But I do think that I've never liked the fandom around him, the fanaticism, in my opinion, around him. And I think I am surprised. I guess what I'm saying is why it matters is I think that community should wake up sometimes a little bit, and things like this it surprises me that it's not changing in that group's like opinion, I guess. This is what we were saying earlier, it's just like we can't, never meet your heroes, nobody's perfect, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the other part to it, is that he is leading a group of his Lue Elizondo warriors. He calls this a war, you have to take sides, and he's essentially rallying them to attack people like me. I've got to a lot of attacks, people are saying, oh, Lue Elizondo was right calling your mother a whore. He has this army of supporters who he incites. And I mean, I think there's no denying that he's inciting people to be jerks.
Well, the last week, there have been a couple of, I don't have any proof of that, right? But in the last couple of weeks, there have been a couple of mongoloids that are doxing people, that are forcing people to close their Twitter accounts, that are threatening people not to go on each other's shows. And I'm talking about salt of the earth, wonderful people that everybody knows. They're like calling me going, do you know about this? Do you know about this guy or this person saying and doing things like this? Yeah. Let me tell you, these are a lot of things I haven't talked about that have happened behind the scenes. Videos of these people that I wanted to make, just like I did with Thomas Fessler and his BS. There is an element of these guys who think they are the shield that is going to protect this story. They are the tip of the spear, but I don't know, because I will go out on the limb and say I don't think people are being reached out to, because if there was anybody that was going to be reached out to, it would have been me. It would have been, hey, Lou, can you do us a favor? This Mick West stuff, him coming on your show, can you please stop? That never happened. Mm-hmm. I asked Keith Clore to come on the show. And nobody ever stopped me from doing that. Anybody that I've ever had on the show, nobody's ever contacted me, no matter how much I've been on their side, no matter how much I've asked for their help, no matter how many times they've come on this show. I've never once been approached in a way like that. I think these are extremists who are taking words and building a belief system off of it, and then implementing as if it's like the Quran or some, or the Bible. It's some book that they have to protect and they have to hold over their heart. And it doesn't matter who the hell gets in their way, just as long as they agree with them. And if you don't agree with us, well, we're going to do everything in our power to burn you to the ground. So that's what I'll say to that accusation.
Lue Elizondo has to know that's going on too, and he could stop all that with one tweet.
Or start all of it with one tweet, because they'll say on the public profile there was 4 tweets. I will not say what they were. 4 tweets in a row. That this was also before I knew about any of this Faceless Bureaucrat stuff. About somebody that I know. That
show a couple more tweets by the way.
But this was from his main account, like official account, before this drama came out. That was some UFO Twitter related drama and sent a lot of people to a very small YouTube channel, right? A lot of hate. I don't know the context, so I don't, but that was public. That was on his main profile, right?
Yeah.
And I will say those claims, if you go look back, those people got a lot of SHIT for that. And if we look now at these cat tweets, that didn't seem like a big deal if what those people claimed compared to what we're seing here. So I'll just, put that out there. And I think maybe we should go back in time. If people know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, you commented at the time, and you can maybe go back and look at your comments and undo them.
I just love this. I love uplifting tweets. My guy just used mongoloids in a derogatory way, is now telling people how to act. This world is weird. Listen, when you interact with these folks, that term fits. Okay, really disgusting behavior that people aren't even talking about because they're scared to talk about it. And it's honestly, it's just, the problem is as soon as you point them out, then you have to have a back and forth, and it's tiring. It's annoying. I don't want to go through it again, like I've done this last week and a half. But all of these people, we'll get to this tweet in a second because we got made fun of. Somebody had said, was it Dimensional Babe said UCR needs to change the title to reviewing one tweet from Faceless Bureaucrat. Well, screw it. Let's read the tweet. Sarah Scholes says, "You're Pentagon's UFO investigator, folks." And it's a New York Times article about Robert Bigelow and surviving death. And I guess it was, I don't remember this article, reading this article, but I guess it was a little, I guess Faceless Bureaucrat didn't like it. And he says, "Sarah, you obviously jealous, and your sniping of this subject, just like the UFO subject did, will make you a laughing stock. Pull up before it's too late and you crash into the hard and lonely mountain that's called truth."
And then he goes right on in another tweet saying that she's not a real journalist. She's a chlor groupie, which is another kind of MO of Lue Elizondo, which is guilt by association. Don't listen to horror arguments. It really gets me is that, his whole thing seems to be don't even listen to the arguments that these people are making. Because he's a chlor groupie, and he's doing the same stuff in his public interviews now too, as the real Lue Elizondo, where he says, my critics are just basement dwellers living in their mom's basement, and they're all felons, and he isn't even specific about who he's saying. He's just paints all of his critics with a broad brush of being, porn watching basement dwellers who, and it's insulting to people who have legitimate criticism, and it does the discussion and the conversation absolutely no good.
No, I'd agree with you there. And just FYI, Christopher Wolford said this is the kind of garbage I can't stand, and she's a journalist. I'll tell you, that is one of the worst people of these offenses on Twitter. If there was anybody I would say stay far away from as you possibly can, it's that gentleman right there. And then he backs her up with, she's not a real journalist, she's a chlor groupie. Yeah, again, like backing that guy, just be careful. Be very, very careful. That's all I'll say.
Here's another one where UFO Jesus, post-disclosure world, is kind of saying, hey, maybe Mick is right, maybe not. I'm going to be a little bit open-ended on this. And here's, Lue Elizondo, who I'm sure UFO Jesus knew that this was Lue Elizondo at the time, saying essentially, no, don't have an open mind. Don't listen to me. He's, and it's,
well, let's read it. I mean, it says, yeah, Mick, because jets fall from 80,000 feet and hover over the water, then bounce around like ping pong balls and meet other jets in their campsite 60 miles away in 6 seconds. Yep, your analysis is spot on yet again.
But of course,
Can I
Mick
also-
West isn't talking about any of those facts. He's talking about the FLIR video and the GoFence.
Can I remind people too of some context too, again, of what we do know, right? Because again, I think for me, I'm not 100% because I don't know enough about how Elizondo tweets, I guess. All those speeches I tuned out has gotten me. But let's remember what he did for sure say is that he said the reason he had alternate accounts or account, I don't know, was the first thing he said was because he collects intelligence. So I think that's another thing people need to remember. This is not just like somebody on Twitter or even a basketball player or somebody with a PR company. This is somebody with counterintelligence training and experience. He's been criticized for coming from that world to begin with, admitting that he creates Twitter accounts and interacts with, I guess, UFO Twitter to do intelligence. So I have to remind people, I think that's a really important part of the story. That would have been a big, I think, I think it's a headline worthy of the public being aware of, right?
Well, here's the thing, right? Is I don't know Will Smith, but I'm still disappointed in his actions. I know Lue, and this disappoints me. Like, if this is him, this disappoints me. Does that mean I'm unsubscribing from Lue Elizondo, or that I hate Lue Elizondo, or that I'm not doing the Big Phone Home 3 or still trying to contact lawmakers for the benefit of the discussion? Absolutely not. No, that's not what that means at all. I'm allowed to be disappointed in this. It's disappointing. At the very least, I think for some people it's disappointing. For other people, it's even worse. For some people, like I said, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And I think when we have public hearings, I don't think it's going to matter. But
Right.
Go ahead, rather. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. I mean, ultimately, UFO Twitter doesn't really matter, right? There's
right.
maybe a couple thousand of us here, so it is.
Yes.
I mean, I still don't really know what any of this means. Why is Lue doing this? I don't really buy that he's just blowing off steam. It really feels like manipulation to me. Manipulation, and clearly it's being deceitful. I'd say that using a sock puppet account of any to address criticisms of you is deceitful, but I think it's clearly manipulative as well.
This is a response. Do you know you're a troll, or do you only think you're a troll? Ever serve? Never mind. The real question I have is, does your mother know you're using her laptop again while she naps? May want to run back to your Sega. Well, that definitely ages somebody, because I know nobody's playing Sega right now.
That cuts right at me.
Yeah. Are you a big Sega Genesis guy?
Love my Sega Genesis, my Dreamcast.
I definitely it doesn't really bother. It bothers me no matter what the context is when people hold over your head, well, have you ever served? No, but that doesn't mean you're right either. like that doesn't mean you're right. And that's the whole point of checks and balances in the 3-tier government system. Like we're allowed to question our military, and still support our veterans at the same time. And those two things get confused a lot, especially around 2001 and in the early 2000s, in the first invasion of Iraq. It was, don't ask any questions, just support your troops. And if, God forbid, you bring up any sort of dissension, it's like, oh, you don't support our troops, you're a communist, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're that. And it's just like, no, we can still have a conversation about geo and foreign politics without me not supporting veterans. I mean, that's those two things can exist. And I think this is the same thing here. Like, you can be disappointed or you can not care. Both of these things can exist, but at least now we've added context to the things that either we're bothered about or that just hit us the wrong way. And I think doing this, at least now everybody knows, okay, this is where they're coming from. And of course, this is going to be taken out of context. People are going to clip parts of this. People are going to do whatever they want with this footage, and they're going to edit it in a way that makes us sound like we hate Lue Elizondo, and that's absolutely not the case.
I will say, someone was saying that Lue is kind of funny. I do grant that this account was humorous at times. I got a guffaw out of this one.
Yeah, but there's humor that unites people together, and
right.
And then there's humor that divides people and doesn't progress disclosure. So I think it's just it's like, just what is the intention here? Yeah, keep coming back to that. I think intentions absolutely matter in a world where that's all we kind of have to go on, where it's like I'm not an experiencer. I've never seen a gray aliens. I have to trust people when they share those encounters. I have to trust government with people with government contracts who are sharing evidence with me. I have to trust them, that they're not trying to trick me. So yeah, I mean, but I will say, again, nothing has changed for me at all regarding briefings and what is possible with the Big Phone Home 3. And like I had said, on the last stream, I haven't stood with anybody yet, and I don't tend to stand with anybody. And you have to remember, when you're standing with somebody, you're sometimes standing, or often you're standing on top of somebody else. So, I will support people, and I will support Lue Elizondo and any future disclosures of actual evidence that he brings forth if I find it compelling. I do believe in second chances, and I will watch. I don't know O.J. Simpson's in any Disney movies, but I mean, all of our heroes are collapsing, and I would encourage people, keep watching all the movies you liked from your childhood. Don't let that destroy your memories and your nostalgia. And it should just be a reminder that there is always light in the darkness. There's, even in the darkest people, actually have a good side. And you might be seeing Will Smith at his very best in that, movie scene, right? And it is okay to celebrate the great things about people, and that keeps us going forward to do more great things. So that's where I stand.
Yeah.
Not with anybody though.
Rather, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, right? It's, I wish that Lue Elizondo was who his public persona was. And I still think, it doesn't destroy everything he does. It's continuously disappointing because he's not being accountable. He's not, admitting that, yeah, I got a little hot-headed. I'm not going to do this anymore again. Hey, supporters, let's try to have respectful conversations, not just disrespectful ad hominem attacks on people. If he did that, I'd say, bravo, I'm back on Team Elizondo 100%. But without that, I'm still supportive of what he's done, but I don't know if he has much more to add if he's just going to act like this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in the sentiment that I'm disappointed, but it doesn't change how I feel about him as a person, because I know humans have flaws. And again, if I'm going to get mad, especially, or disappointed, I'm setting my expectations way too high. And that's on me. That's on me. That's on you as the viewer.
Lue Elizondo did post what the expectation should be, and he's not living up to that.
That's
not what
fair.
it should be, but what he wanted.
Yeah, people.
That's fair.
You can sell potatoes, you can sell apples or lemons, and I can buy it or not buy it, and I don't even have to ever explain why I buy something or not. That's also something you need to remember. There doesn't even have to be alternate Twitter accounts. If somebody just doesn't trust Lue Elizondo and just doesn't believe what he has to say, that's okay.
You have that right. Yeah, no, you have that right.
You have the right to believe whatever.
I mean, just as long as you keep it respectful.
Sure.
And I think that's where, I think that's where
everything.
my biggest grief with channels like Goof On and Steve Cambion is, every once in a while they're making wonderful points, but those points are buried under of just the layers and layers and layers of stuff that they're passing off as humor, and it's not. It's just kind of misogynistic. It's angry. It doesn't convince people I mean, at least when I'm getting yelled at in my headphones, I usually change the channel, like with a loud commercial. And that's what it is. They're just these loud commercials that might be giving you good information, but you're not going to listen to the whole thing because it's annoying your ears. It hits the ear hard. And there's a line, and you got to be respectful. And I've crossed that line into disrespectful. I mean, we're human. You're going to have those things. And I mean, I think in the last week, I've probably have had my moments, but God, if you could know the stuff behind the scenes, how many times I warn people, please don't do this. But if you're going to do this, you know, there's going to be a reaction to it, just so you know. Sometimes I've said it nicely, sometimes not so nicely, especially depends on who I'm dealing with. You know, but I've never, ever have fat shamed anybody, or, you know, been misogynistic toward women, or have called women bitches on my show, or have, you know, made fun of people by dressing like them and mocking them and their work. I disagree with people's work. I disagree with people's theories. And I think that's the most egregious we get. And I can't believe that we get more crap than the channels that are doing this in such a disgusting way. Like in 2022, I feel like this topic just doesn't need to be there. And Rather's right. When the leader of this, especially the last, whether he likes to admit it or not, he is the face of this. Lue Elizondo is the face of this new discussion from 2017 forward. And when we find out he's doing stuff like
for
this.
Now, remember, it was Tom DeLonge, then it was Jeremy Corbell, then it was Elizondo. So we'll see what will history say? What will this impact on, you know, the community? There tends to be turns taken.
Yeah, I don't think Jeremy Corbell has anywhere near the credibility, because he's not, no offense to Jeremy, he's not where this guy came from.
Well,
and
right,
that's
and
why
then you
he's
have
so
the whole
interesting.
Bob Lazar Association, which is a it's a dissenting topic, right? Like it's not something to start with anymore, or put on a congressperson's desk, right? So is this now going to be a dissenting just topic that's just like, it brings in negative comments to a live chat, you know, in a stream where it didn't before? I would hope not. Like this is Will Smith too. Listen to your PR person.
Well, our chat's been insanely respectful today, so I gotta say thank you.
Good advice during these times, you know. But I'm just saying, remember when everybody was saying that Tom DeLonge was responsible for disclosure? Guys, that was the narrative, and it was like, should we trust him or not? Did the Men in Black visit him or not? There were literally articles about that.
I know that was a narrative, but I never believed that. Like for me, it was the New York Times, and I mean, I think he's fun to listen to. He definitely helped bring eyeballs to it. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I'm not giving him credit.
There were debates on UFO Twitter about giving him enough credit and giving him his dues, you know, and if people trusted him. But that's exactly what's happening today with Mr. Elizondo, right? So to what does it matter? No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's a pattern. People are people. The evidence is the evidence, you know. And
right, but I mean, I think the biggest difference though is that Lue, again, he's a lot different than all of those other examples, because he's influencing lawmakers. He's meeting in congressional settings. He's bringing attention to things that people weren't paying attention to before. He's suing the government. His emails were erased. All of these things that he's fighting against are still valid fights, and we'll help him however we can in making sure that these things, he gets his emails back. I want to see those emails. I want to see what's happening. Go ahead, Ryan.
And I don't want to detract from any of those efforts. And, you know, people accuse me of, hey, by raising this and, you know, bringing this to light, you're detracting from those efforts. I would argue that, you know, Lue Elizondo, our best advice to him would be, stop doing this stuff, because it does potentially hurt those efforts. You know, lawmakers aren't going to want to listen to someone who's having these petty battles with people on Twitter.
Lawmakers aren't finding out about this. Lawmakers are not finding out. Yeah, they will never find out about this. This is only something that this will never be on 60 Minutes. This will never be in the New York Times.
My advice to Lue Elizondo, which I think is good advice, would be to Be
Yes.
respectful and put a lid on your sock puppet again.
Well, just because the story won't be elevated to a level in front of a lawmaker doesn't mean that the action isn't wrong.
I mean, it'll turn off people like me, like people who are just trying to learn and
trying to help.
Get
trying
to
to help.
It turns
like
people
again,
off.
and this is and guys, like Rather has dumped between all of us thousands of hours to the phone home 1, 2, and 3, like and into the new one, part 3. Like, this is somebody who wants the same answers that you're doing, but he's actually doing something about it. He's helping us write the templates. He's helping us create the email lists and getting guests and coordinating and all that stuff behind the scenes that it creates to do a successful 4-8-hour live streams. I mean, other people have tried it and quit around hour 6.5 or 7. They couldn't even do the whole thing. Like, it's not easy. We make this look easy on a lot of levels. This is not easy. And for anyone to say that this guy here does not care or hasn't done anything for this effort, you're just 100% wrong. That's the only thing I'll be definitive about. We've done everything.
Appreciate you, Lou.
We've done everything in our power to move this discussion forward, besides having a podcast, besides having a Twitter account, besides just talking shit. We have skin in the game here. We've done the work. We've influenced people to contact lawmakers. We've gotten responses. It's working. You want to help us? Great. You want to start your own thing? God bless you. Please do. But we've got skin in the game. So to sit here and turn around and call us betrayers or haters or TMZ, which I find fucking hilarious. But if we grow into a TMZ style channel, that means that the topic is going somewhere. So I'll take it as a compliment for now. But
size,
to think of this idea that we're not here for the truth is laughable. And I don't have to say it.
Guys, I wouldn't still be here.
Yeah.
more than 10 years in now if I wasn't and I have a day job, guys, this whole time. I promise I promise you.
Tell me about it.
I have no alternate accounts, just so you know. Those sightings, that's it. Literally every case I've ever thought was interesting is on my website. You can find out everything you could possibly want to know about it. Nothing is hidden.
Yeah, go check out
Bravo.
Jane's
experience.
The good stuff you hide from us, Jane.
Jane's link is in the description below, so go check her out. Subscribe to her channel. Go read her investigative reports because she does amazing work. You have anything you're working on this week?
Those DIRD documents dropped, and there's a very interesting one about nuking the moon. And we
haven't even gotten a chance.
Not
to
as
talk
crazy
about
as it sounds.
Yeah. Well, let's. You think you'll be done by Friday?
Yeah, probably.
All right. Well, Friday's going to be our last show before we take. I haven't decided, a 2 or 3 week break, depending on what happens. I think we're going to extend it to 3. But we're going to be back in late April, and so that'd be great to talk about it before we take our break. All right, that's it. That's the show. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm sure people are going to light us on fire and say all sorts of insane shit. That's okay.
I
mean,
we're just
You know what's great is I haven't seen it in the chat. Everyone in the chat's been super cool so far. Just want to say thank you to everyone out there. 5x5 News, Too Much Disclosure, Stefan, Alien Scientist was in the house, JJ, Justin S, Eventide, Lord Ludacris, Logan Black, Josh and Artemis show was here. Want to say thank you to everyone who gave us a super chat. John Russell with this $100 super chat to start the show. Thank you so damn much.
What a guy.
Man. Unbelievable donation. We truly appreciate it. Ryan B, thank you. Dorothy Hawkins, thank you. G West, thank you, my good sir. Eventide, thank you. Meat Cutter, thank you. And Dimensional Babe, thank you guys all so much. And Admiral Snack Bar, that's a great name. That's a great name. Did we read the super chat? Did I miss this one?
We did. No. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's read it. Admiral Snack Bar with a $5 donation. But Lou said he has another account to gather intel. You wouldn't post it if you're trying to keep a low profile.
He said he was trying to pick out
Robot Mafia. Look that up.
Oh man.
$10 donation from G West says, I think my whole life I wanted someone with the likes of Carl Sagan to bring disclosure. It is not going to be that way, but it is what it is. I still believe Lou and will watch it unfold. That's a great way to
I mean, I still believe him too. And I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that statement. Jane Price, still 50-50. Either way, you guys, thank you so damn much for checking us out. Links in the description for DOS Tapes, Jane, myself, and our guest, Jazz Shaw. So go check out the links in the description below. Until Wednesday, we will have John Greenwald coming in and hanging out for an hour. We'll see you Wednesday. Until then, love you all very much. Be safe out there. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. Until next time, I'm Luis Jimenez. Rather be squiddy. UFO Jane. We'll see you. Peace. I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom, you're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.